Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to you with another edition of this week's online Parashat class or online Torah portion class. We are concluding the year of 5776, which we read the second triennial of the Torah portion. Next year, next cycle, which begins next week with the Torah portion of Bereshit of Genesis, we'll be looking at the third selection from the Torah portion, which was actually the first year that we had these classes. So we'll be doing another go around, which I think is really appropriate given the fact that we're about to celebrate the holiday of Simchat Torah, rejoice in the words of the Torah, that they should always be on our lips, and that we should continually come back to them always and again. So we'll be coming back to the words of the third triennial next week and begin a whole year looking at that. We are on the final selection of the Torah portion this week. Although Shabbat this week is Chol HaMoed Sukkot, which is the Sabbath during the midst of the holiday of Sukkot, we will not be reading as such the Torah portion that we normally be reading this week. However, we do read the normal Torah portion on Monday morning or on Tuesday morning, depending upon your tradition, with Parashat Vizot Hab'racha, the last Torah portion in the entire Torah, which is read at the same time or read right before. We then read the book of we read the Torah portion of, or the first Aliyah at least, of Bereshit of Genesis. And so I want to actually focus today's learning on Vizot HaBracha, which we're going to be reading again early next week. And Vizot HaBracha does not have a particular triennial. It's a very short Torah portion. There's only 2 different chapters in it. The last chapter is sort of Moses' absolute farewell as he goes up to the mountain and sort of leaves the people of Israel. But the first chapter is Moses offering blessings to all the different tribes of Israel. And fascinatingly, his blessings mimic almost perfectly what Jacob said to his children at the end of Jacob's life in the very last chapter, in the very last Torah portion of the book of Genesis, known as Parashat Vayechi. So you have Jacob, who is, of course, named Israel, and then Moses, who is the prophet who leads Israel. Jacob talks to his children, who are the different leaders of the tribes of Israel, who actually are the forefathers of the tribes of Israel. And then Moses speaks to those same tribes, just now as much larger people, not just simply as individuals. And so you have a huge parallel between these two major figures within Israelite, within the biblical story. And so looking at their talking at their speeches to their children and to the tribes, I think is very instructive in terms of seeing both the path that the Israelites have taken and also understanding what value is there in these final instructions to the children or to the tribes. And as such, I want to start with the very first line of each chapter, of chapter 33 in our Torah portion and chapter 49 in the book of Genesis, to see how those parallels begin. So you have here chapter 33, verse 1. Vizot HaBracha, and this is the blessing, Asher Beirach Moshe Isha Elohim et Bnei Yisrael, that Moses blessed, or in another translation, bade farewell, Moses, who was a man of God, to the children of Israel, Lifnei Moto, before his death. And so you have a very clear sense that what Moses is offering here is a kind of blessing to all the different tribes of Israel. Is it the same kind of sense for Jacob? Well, let's take a look. Vayikra Yaakov el banav, and Jacob called to his children, Vayomer he'asfu ve'agida lachem, gather together and I will speak to you, et asher yikra etchem, what shall happen to you be'acharit hayamim, at the, this is a very difficult word to translate, either in the latter days or at the end of days. So there is a tradition that Jacob was told what was going to happen when the Messiah would come, what would happen at the end of days, and he was about to go tell his sons when God basically stopped him from doing so. So that's one way of potentially looking at the term acharit hayamim. But the another way to take a look at it is the idea that it is speaking about a particular time in the future, not in terms of at the end of all of the days, achar hayamim, but rather in the future days that is to come, i.e., in the latter days of not just your life, but in the life of your children. Because if we remember the idea embedded within the Torah that children begat other children, that begat other children, and they fall within the same line, within the same seed, within the same family or clan, and that an individual is blessed by virtue of their children who come forward and become leaders, and then increase their wealth and increase all of their holdings and all of their land. So Abraham, for instance, when he did not have a child, was worried that he was not only not blessed, but that he would have no share of what is to come in the future world, because he did not have any children who would basically be standing in for him as receiving his share. So that you have these tribes, you have these individuals who are the starters of these tribes, and in many ways what happens to the tribes is a reflection of that individual. So to a certain degree, when Jacob is coming there to speak to his children, he's telling him what is going to happen to your families over the course of the future. That parallel with Moses, I think, is fascinating, because as we're about to see, that there are a number of similarities between the blessings between what is said by Moses and by Jacob, and there are also certain differences, but that Moses's language is that of offering a blessing, as if to say, before I leave, I want to share something with you. Like when you go to a wedding, for instance, and you take your farewell, you go up to the bride and groom, and the bride and groom offer you a blessing, as is purportedly their power over the course of the first year of their marriage, that anyone can bestow upon you blessing, and blessings are often mentioned before as you leave. So for instance, when we bless after the end of a meal, I think that part of the idea is that we want this meal to continually bless us as we move forward, as we leave this meal, which is why a lot of the language of the blessing of the grace after meals, of Birkat HaMazon, is not just referring to the food, but referring to the future messianic redemption. So as to say that we want this time together to be a blessing for a wonderful future. So in many ways, blessings actually do speak to the sense of what is going to happen in the future. But I think that one key difference between a blessing and, let's say, what we get from what Jacob is offering his children is that no one seems to indicate, or no one seems to think, that a blessing necessarily means that this is what is going to happen in the future. And fascinatingly, when Jacob is speaking to his children, there's very little language of blessing. There isn't one. In his blessing to Joseph, he does speak about how the blessing should continually rest upon him. And in fact, one of the phrases that Moses' blessing share with what Jacob says to his children is the phrase, Vatihiyana or Vatavona El Rosh Yosef Kod Kod Nezir Echav. That this shall come to be, or this shall come to rest upon the head of Joseph, who is the elect of his brothers. Meaning that Joseph, whatever is supposed to happen to Joseph, a sense of blessing, a sense of God's presence, as in the case of Moses' blessing, that it shall rest upon his head and go that way for the future. But other than that, Jacob's offerings to his children don't seem to resemble much a blessing at all. In fact, it seems to be focusing a lot on what happened in the past and how that's going to foretell the future. For that, we're going to look at quickly at a couple of those passages, beginning with the first one of on his speaking on what he says to his son Reuben, who was the firstborn but is no longer. Reuven bechori ata. Reuven, you are my firstborn. Kochi veroshit oni. You are my first fruits and my strength. Yeter se'et veyeter haz. The excellence of dignity, the excellency of power. Achaz kamayim al totar. But you're unstable as water. Ki alita mishkavei avicha. Because you went up and lied on your father's bed. What he's specifically referring to is a scene in chapter 35, in which Reuben is actually sleeps with Jacob's concubine Bilhah, and therefore commits the sin of incest. Az chilalta yitzui ala. And so, because of what you did, you defiled it as you went up when you went up to my couch. And this, first off, as we can see, there's very little mentioning of blessing. There's very little mentioning of actually what is going to happen. But at the same time, in this moment, as Reuben is chastised for sleeping with Jacob's concubine, you get the sense that Jacob's birthright is now being lost. He is now no longer going to be the leader. He had all this great dignity, but then he lost it because of his action against his father. And how is Jacob then, how is Reuben understood within the blessings of Moses? Is it similar? Is it different? Just one line. Yechi Reuven ve'al yamot. Let Reuben live and not die. Vihi metav mispar. In that his men have become few. In other words, what Moses is saying here is that there is a hope that Reuben can continually increase, even though he has very few numbers, and there's therefore a fear that he might die out. In other words, what Moses is talking about is a hope for the future. The term Yechi Reuven is let this be, this is what happened in the future, as opposed to Jacob, which is saying that this is what you did in the past, and thus it affects your future. So here you have the key difference between blessing by Moses and what Jacob did, which I wouldn't really consider to be blessing, although it may seem like it, is that Jacob is using the past to determine what the future is going to be, to explain why the future is going to be what it is. Whereas Moses is using his ability to bless, to offer something to the one who is receiving the blessing that may or may not be in line with the way in which that person is going, or the way in which that tribe is moving. So, meaning that if I offer someone a blessing, that you may have success, that you may have wealth, that you may be able to find peace and understanding, I am not saying that this is exactly what you're going to have. Because it may be that everything in the past means everything that's happened to you in the past may not actually be leading towards that end. That would be as if I was Jacob, if I was using the past to say, well, obviously this is going to continue in this direction. But rather a blessing, even in the simple one, is to say, let you live, let you continue to survive, is offering a hope for the future, not a determination of what that future is going to be. And that's a fascinating, I think, a really interesting idea, especially when you look at the tribe of Levi and and the major difference between the way in which Jacob talks to Levi and that Moses talks to Levi. So the first thing is that Jacob talks to to Shimon and Levi, to Simeon and Levi, because they were the ones who attacked Israel's enemy when they took their sister against her will, and so it speaks of them. Shimon v'Levi achim kle chamas mecherotehem, that you have the weapons of violence. That this is this is how you operate. You use swords. You use warfare to solve your problems. B'sidom al tavo nafshi. Let my soul not come into their counsel. Bikalam al techad kavodi. Unto their assembly, let my glory not be united. Ki ve'apam haragu ish. For in their anger they slew men. Uvirtsonam ikrushor. And their self-will they killed oxen. Arur apam ki az ve'evratam ki kashata. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. Achalkem bi Yaakov va'afitzem bi Yisrael. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So what Jacob is offering to say, this is what's going to happen to you, this is what's going to happen in the future to you, is particularly based upon what Shimon and Levi did, that they were trying to uphold their sister's honor, and yet Jacob saw that as a violation of what they should not be doing. And as such, Jacob lashes out at Shimon and Levi and says, because of what it is that you did, i.e. what happened in the past, that is going to determine this future, which I'm not going to have a part of. I'm not going to give you any sense of blessing whatsoever. You think then that even more so than what Reuben did to Jacob, that what Levi and Shimon did would lead to them losing out on any kind of blessing that would happen in the future. And yet, what happens to the tribe of Levi in the case of Moses? The first thing is, before we even get to what Moses actually says, it's important to remember that Moses is from the tribe of Levi. Moses is the leader of the people from the tribe of Levi. He appoints his brother Aaron, also from the tribe of Levi, to be the head of the priestly clan, which means that the Levites and the priests obviously within them are the ones who have the closest and most direct relationship with God. That doesn't necessarily seem to indicate what Jacob was referring to, in the sense that Levi is going to be scattered just like the tribe of Shimon. So what blessing does Moses have, and how does that evoke what Jacob was offering beforehand, or does it just talk about it in a very different way? Ulevi amar tumecha ve'urecha leish chasidecha. And for Levi, he said that your Urim and your Tumim and your Urim, the breastplates that the priests uses before God, shall always be with your loved one. Asher nisito b'masa terivehu al mei meriva. Your loved one who tested you in the wilderness of Massa and at the waters of Merivah. Now, interestingly about this verse, that it seems that while Moses is invoking the tribe of Levi, that's who he's referring to, he's actually speaking to God, that God should use his Urim and Tumim to remember or to be close to his loved one, i.e. of Levi. Levi, who did all of these things in Masa and also Me Meriva, meaning that Levi was the ones who tested God. And we remember that from, for instance, of Korach, who is the individual, excuse me. Apologize about the interruption. So Levi, the Levite family were the ones who tested God in the wilderness, and yet they're also chosen to be the priests and to be the Levites who serve God. And so Moses, in many ways, is asking God to remember that, even though to remember the fact that they're supposed to be serving God, understanding the fact that this is the same tribe that causes problems. And that idea that they're the ones who are causing problems and yet they're also serving God, I think speaks to this movement from Jacob, who says that Levi is a troublemaker, to the idea that yes, they may have been a troublemaker, they may have that part of themselves, but they can actually serve a greater purpose as well. As Moses says, Ha'omer la'aviv u'li'imo, who said of his father and his mother, Lo re'itiv ve'etachav lo hikir. I have not seen him. Neither did he acknowledge his brethren. Lo hikir et banav lo yada. Ki shamaru imratecha uvritecha yinsoru. For they have observed thy word and have kept thy covenant. In other words, that their focus, meaning the tribe of Levi, is to focus on God's covenant. And what does that mean to focus on God's covenant? Yoru mishpatecha liYaakov, that they should teach God's laws to Jacob, v'toratcha liYisrael, and your teachings, God, to all of Israel. Yasimu ketorah ba'apecha, they shall put incense before you, v'chalil al mizbachecha, and a whole burnt offering upon your altar. And so, Be'orach Adonai chelo, bless the Lord his substance, ufa'ol yadav tirtzeh, and accept the work of his hands. Mechotz motnaim kamav u'misanav min yikumun. Smite through the loins of them that rise up against them, and of them that hate him, and that they rise not again. So, and to a certain degree, this is an entreaty by Moses to God to remember the Levites, to make sure that they continue in the way of serving God, that God should smote all the enemies who try to bring the tribe of Levi down, as well as an acknowledgement that Levi is not necessarily the most, you could say, that they aren't the easiest tribe to deal with, that they do things that can drive you crazy, that are seemingly revolting against God. And so you have a little bit of Jacob in there, and yet the power of blessing is to say that though there may be that past, we believe in a bright future. And that, I think, is where the relationship between blessing and future is really born, meaning that the power of blessing is not that we can know what our future is, but is that it can help us recognize that we have a better future than what our past or what our present says. We may like where we are, but as in the case of what Jacob has said about all of his tribes, and about what the prophets say about the way in which Israel has acted, that our past includes many errors, many mistakes, many things that we've just gotten wrong. And blessing comes when we say that though we may be faulty, though we may have these things that that make our life difficult, and that we do to make life difficult for others and also for God. Despite all that, we believe in the power of potential. We believe that blessing is saying that we have the potential to be something, even if we haven't necessarily shown it before. Now, the Levites have shown it because they've been the ones to serve God. And yet, at the same time, they're also not perfect. They're trying to move in that direction. Reuben before, that even though he is no longer the head of the family, the blessing is to continue to survive, to continue to strive, and then you never know what is going to happen. Meaning that the blessings that Moses is offering is taking the realities that maybe Jacob had seen in his children and where his children and obviously their tribes are going to lead to, and to say that past does not have to be our future. And if we use the power of blessing right, then we can use our ability to hope for a better future to gird ourselves and to gird our loved ones with the strength to know that they can achieve something greater. And so my hope is that whether it's offering a blessing to ourselves or to others, that we discover that power of blessing, to understand that though we may be in a certain place at this point in time, though we may have a history that tells us that we're going to be going in a certain direction, that a blessing is that ability to say that I have potential for a better future. And at this time of introspection during the high holiday season, may we open ourselves to the possibility of that potential in blessing. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's class. We'll begin with 5776 with the new we'll begin with the new Torah cycle next week with Parashat Breshit, with the beginning of the book of Genesis. Take care and all the best. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.